Hi everybody and welcome back to Foothills Builds. I'm Daniel and this is part 2 of our barn build. If you missed part 1, be sure to check out our previous video where we cover the past 2 years of the project. In this video we'll showing the first stage of the lean-to on the east side of the building, including installing the first post and beam in their final position. So let's get to work. We start by drilling the holes for the wedge anchors into the concrete piles using a hammer drill. The wedge anchors are 3/8 by 5 inch picked up from the local hardware store. For mounting the posts we are using adjustable steel post bases. Measure twice, drill once. Theo is measuring out the exact position for the wedge anchor holes. Post bases are slightly offset, and sometimes the mounting hole at the bottom of the post is as well. You will see that later during the post preparation. After drilling the holes and installing the post base on the concrete pile, Theo measures the height of an already installed corner post using a laser level and transfers that measurement to the new post base. The height adjustment is done with a simple nut that threads down onto the post base's threaded rod. You almost can't see the green mark of the laser on the measuring tape here. Now the post gets sanded down and the edges are chamfered to give it a clean, finished look. We already prepared most of this post, but we go through the process for the next posts later in this video. Installing the prepared post is fairly straightforward. Lift it into place and guide the post base into the pre-drilled hole. The beam was prepared earlier as well, cut to length with a notch cut out for the post we just installed. Now we are at the heavy lifting stage. The beam needs to be set into the notch on one of the main posts of the building and lowered onto the post we just installed. For that we use our chain hoist crane, which first has to be assembled. The two parts fit together using a mortise and tenon joint that we cut when we originally built the crane. Just before lifting the beam, we remove the house wrap from the main post where the beam notch is located. With the beam hooked up to the crane, we try to lift it into position. This is one of the first attempts. We needed quite a few of them to get this done. This is already attempt number 2 and this also didn't go quite as well. The beam slipped out of the notch and tore some of the house wrap underneath. Luckily everything under the beam will eventually be inside of the building, so it's not really a big deal. and up to the next and final attempt. We changed our approach a little bit, lifting the lower end into place first and temporarily securing it with some scrap wood. And that finally did the trick. We've got the first post and beam into their final position. We put a few staples in the house wrap to stop the wind from tearing it up any further. Just 7 more to go. During the week, Theo finished installing the remaining house wrap on the west and the north side of the building. Of course, as always, the little wood stove inside was fired up to warm up in between. Here you can see some of the final pieces of sheeting going up on the front south side of the building. As usual, the stapler wasn't a big fan of the cold Canadian winter. The next weekend brought us a surprise, almost 8 inches or 20 centimeters of snow overnight. Before we got to work, Theo cleared some snow off the driveway, and after that we started preparing 2 more beams and posts for the lean-to. First, one end of the beam gets marked and cut square to create a reference. As you can hear, the big circular saw does not get enough power, since we either running it off the generator or using a long extension cord from the house, which means some voltage loss. Now the final length of the beams is measured, marked and cut. The big saw only cuts about 6 inches deep, so we use the sawzall to finish the cut. This side of the beam will sit in the post pocket and won't be visible, so it doesn't need to look perfect. With the beams cut to their final length, it's time to cut out the section that will sit on the post later. Theo measures out the exact position based on his CAD drawings. He did all the design work himself and he's definitely the wood guy between the two of us. Everything was also checked over by a structural engineer. Almost looks like the sawzall needs a new blade here. Once the final cuts are done with the circular saw and the sawzall, we clean out the cutout with a chisel and hammer. One done, let's move to the next beam. Here's a closer view of Theo cleaning out the cutout, which will later sit on the post. We cut all the beams ourselves on the sawmill. Some of the trees weren't quite big enough, so there's a bit of bark left on the corners, which Theo is removing here. The beams are stronger than they need to be, so a little variation doesn't cause any problems. Next we move on to the posts we mentioned earlier. They are way easier than the beams. Just cut one end square as a reference, then cut the other one to the final length. Once the post is cut to length, we drill a hole in the bottom to fit the threaded rod from the post base. Since our concrete piles aren't perfectly aligned, we sometimes have to offset both the base and the hole slightly. Next, the steel plate that sits on the nut gets screwed to the bottom of the post for extra stability. Just like that, we clean up the edges and sand everything down for a nicer look. Working with wood is great. There are always some scraps to keep the fire going. Once the beams and posts were ready, I spent some time outside in the snow preparing the next two post bases. I marked out the positions for the holes and drilled them with the hammer drill. I pre-drilled the holes with a smaller bit and later finished them to the full size, but I think you get the idea. Then I set the wedge anchors with a hammer and attached the post base using some nuts. Finally, we adjusted the height using the laser level. Here's a closer look at the laser mark on the measuring tape. A little bit at a time, but we're not quite there yet. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed following along with our project and we'll see you in the next video. And don't forget to like and subscribe.